Well, hello, friends. I'm Kathy Afzali. This is You Can Handle the Truth, and we have a guest today. We have a guest all the way from a different country today. This is, I think, our second international guest. He is from Canada, that foreign country so far away. But he is in our time zone, so at least none of us had to get up early or stay up late to have this conversation. His name is Greg Armstrong. He is the pastor and church planter of Saturate Church in, I'm probably going to butcher the name of this town. It's Mississauga, which is near Toronto. Did I say it right?
Mississauga.
Mississauga, Canada, which is not far from Toronto. And so a few weeks back, and welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're so glad you're here. And so let me kind of give the backstory a little bit, and then we'll just start figuring it all out. We'll figure out all the ails of the world here today. Okay, Greg? So about a few weeks back, I had a man on the show, as some of you know, Dr. Jay Smith, who is very active in Christian polemics to Muslims. And he is definitely got ideas about the best practices for speaking to Muslims. His big theory that he says is the man, the place, and the book. And he says that each of those things that Islam is based on has a very faulty foundation in terms of its reliability, its historical reliability. After that episode aired, Greg emailed me, or I think actually you sent me a message on the YouTube channel, and we started conversing. And he basically refutes some of what Jay Smith has said. And I did share with him that Jay is my friend now, so I am going to have his back. But I think it's very important for Christians to hear both sides of an opinion of different things. So Greg is going to talk to us about some of Jay's theories and why he doesn't think they're correct. And then hopefully we'll have enough time for Greg to talk about his ministry to Muslims in Canada and how he's been very effective of turning souls to Christ. So welcome again, Greg.
Thanks so much for having me.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about what Jay talked on the show and some of the things that bother you about what he says and why you don't think that's correct. And you never know, I may have him back to counter that, and maybe I could have you both on at some point to have the discussion. He's a really, really kind man and a sweet guy. So maybe you can't tell by his bombasticness, but he's really a very down-to-earth, nice guy. So I'm sure we could have that conversation. Even with your gentle Canadian nature, we Americans, we can still have a good conversation. So.
Well, we have the reputation of being nice, but niceness is not always a good thing. It's usually really what it is trying to be non-offensive, but actually that really opens the door to political correctness and wokeness and stuff, which is what our country really is now. So I'm not so much like that. But
well, I'm so happy to hear that. And I knew I liked you, Greg. So good. We agree on that.
Yeah. And I'm sure Jay would agree as well.
Yes.
And why don't I start with a point actually of agreement with Jay? With him, I know he has remarked a number of times in fairly recent interviews, like in the last, let's say, 3 to 6 months. I've seen him in various interviews where he has said essentially about another methodology, like he calls his method the historical critique, which is a very, let's say, skeptical view of, questioning even the existence of Muhammad and stuff. But another kind of general approach that is very popular online and that he has engaged with in the past as well, as he said, is called the moral critique. So essentially it's critiquing Islam with respect to ethical issues, and especially things related to Muhammad, his wives, his treatment of women and slaves, and jihad issues and stuff like that.
Right.
And so he's remarked that really this is it causes a lot of offense, and it gets really heated very quickly when people address those issues, and that's very popular. And I think, of course, it's like clickbait online. So I'm actually somebody who deals with talking to real life Muslims in person, not on just online, and that's primarily where my ministry is on the ground. Even meeting people in the context of mosques and Muslim events, as well as, of course, neighbors and people around. So if you're going to talk to somebody in person, like those issues are that kind of a topic is very uncomfortable, first off. And it is not met well, especially for any Muslim who is like really like a genuine Muslim, not like a nominal cultural only Muslim. I'm concerned about reaching real Muslims. So not just nominal. Of course, I want to reach all people, but we want to have an approach that is essentially steelman's Islam. So we don't misrepresent it. We don't strawman it. And we basically, as James White has often said, we want to critique the best that Islam has to offer, not the worst.
All right.
Okay. So usually when it comes to ethical things, it is really dealing with the worst, and it often involves a lot of uncharitable interpretations. It's not really dealing with their responses or genuinely accepting viewpoints from Muslims who maybe question various sources that are traditionally associated but not necessarily regarded as reliable and authentic. So there's a variety of views on lots of different issues in Islam. So for us, we care about what's foundational, not just any different issue and arguing about everything, which is generally what we see online, is like every different topic is addressed. And for us, we believe in having a focused strategy that aims at the foundations. And so in that sense, I can agree with Jay about the moral critique. It really, it puts up barriers, it burns bridges, it doesn't help people really to hear. And I would actually say, just one more thing is, I'm not saying it's not effective, okay? It is effective, but I would say primarily for nominal Muslims, not for devout and studied Muslims.
Right.
Devout
because
go ahead.
Just in defense of that way. Now, mind you, I don't have a dog in this fight. I do know some Muslims, and I've tried to speak to them. It is challenging. So I'm on the hunt for best practices. Like, what would be the best way to reach some of these Muslims? What you're saying is that when you go after the moral issues, which I've done personally, I mean, I've even had a short that's gone out, that a short episode about Muhammad and, what the Qur'an says about women and women in heaven and those sorts of things. I mean, there's a lot to choose from in the Qur'an if you want to go after the moral critique. I mean, there's no shortage of material to go after. So the question is, the historical critique, the moral critique, these are all extremely valid. And it's got a lot of low-hanging fruit. The question is, what's the best practice for reaching the more religious Muslims? Because the minute I said to a religious Muslim, Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl, she was like, well, no, that's not true. Right. So they immediately shut down. So I want to hear how you do it and what you have found has been very effective.
Yeah, I would just say when it comes to that, it's not to say, of course, there can be many more points that can be made from the point of view critiquing even that issue to show the person, well, that isn't the sources. And then, you can have I'm not saying that there is nothing to say there. But what I said is people who are more studied in their religion, and I don't mean scholars, I mean just honestly average Muslims I meet all the time who are just knowledgeable about their religion. So, they don't have to be imams or sheikhs, just typical devout Muslims. They already know about those issues. Like a nominal Muslim doesn't know about that issue. So that's why I'm
Hmm.
saying it can be effective, like that person you mentioned. Well, maybe it might actually cause her to think things once you show her Sahih Bukhari and the sources that are about Aisha's age. Of course, I don't
Hmm.
do that. Okay, that's not the
Right.
approach we take. But I'm just
Right.
saying I recognize the other approaches and the points that can be made. And I'm saying it could be effective at leading someone out of Islam, showing things that they're unaware of.
Hmm.
But if you're talking to somebody who is more studied, you're not
Hmm.
necessarily going to be showing them things that they're unaware of. And if they're aware of that issue, they're still a Muslim. Me
Hmm.
bringing it up is not going to lead them out of Islam. They already know about it,
Right.
right? All it's going to do is cause friction, and it's going to basically be me. They're going to see me as somebody who is trying to shame them and uh,
Mm.
especially shame Muhammad. So
Right.
for me, just the general principle is if I don't have to talk about overtly offensive things, if I don't have to, like if I had to, fine, we could talk about it. But if I
Hmm.
don't have to, why would I do it?
Right.
Okay, that's kind of a principle I would operate by. Look, the gospel's offensive enough on its own. I don't need to make it more offensive, right? I'd rather be as gentle and respectful and reasonable and fact-based as possible in
Okay.
the way I approach it.
Okay. I, I think it's perfectly valid. And also, we have to think of our own nature too. I mean, my nature is not necessarily attack, 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 right?
Yeah.
Or, in that polemic approach. I mean, Jay sat here and that's his sweet spot. He's able to
Mhm.
be the Paul that goes into, the place and can say this or say that. That's not necessarily my approach would be to be more relational with the person and be respectful to them and come alongside them.
Why don't I just say, because you brought up Jay and I didn't really address
Hmm.
anything that in
Okay.
terms of critique, I'll just make a few points, okay? And
Hmm.
maybe we can move on, or if you want to talk about it more, it's fine. So first thing, like one of his major points is when he's talking about Muhammad,
Hmm.
that he talks about, well, we don't have the vowels in the Arabic from that time, so early sources that would mention.
He's not saying that anymore. So I'm
Okay,
probably going to cut that out because he's made a point of saying he doesn't go by that anymore. So that's like old information with him. The
okay,
muck
well,
the
that's not what
muckmud.
I've seen. That's not what I've seen, and I would need to check it. But the last of what I've seen when he received criticism on it is not really that he rejected it. But he was trying to move away from referring to using Muhammad as a title. Okay,
Okay.
so the issue is, and what I've seen is uh, the claim that Muhammad was used, or Muhammad or Mahmed, if you're just
Hmm.
using the consonants, was used among the church fathers as a messianic title, and that's just factually false. None of the church fathers, other than Jerome and Origen, and maybe some other rare person, even knew Hebrew. So
Okay.
when they're writing in either Latin or Greek, and of course there's also Syriac church fathers, but primarily the Latin and Greek fathers that are being referred to, like Ambrose writing in Latin, they would never be using the Hebrew term Mehmed.
Okay.
They're using translations, so it doesn't even sound like it. It isn't anything like it. So
Okay.
just that's one issue. Another issue is talking about that there are no 7th century Qur'ans. Well, there are lots of them. And we even have, in particular, one that he hasn't presented in his presentations that I've seen is called Codex Mashhad. And that is dated by scholars between 660 AD to 690. That's very early, since the traditional date for Muhammad's death is 632. So if it's going back potentially as early as 660, that's very close to his life. I mean, if we had manuscripts of, let's say, the New Testament that were that close to the lifetime of Jesus, or even to the authors, I mean, we would be amazed at that. And of course, first century manuscript, first century writings, we can't expect necessarily to get as close, but we do have very close for the Quran. And the Codex Mashhad is about 95% extant text. So 95% of the Quran is survived in that manuscript. And
Okay.
it's basic.
All right.
And it's
So,
basic. Yeah, go ahead.
all right. Yeah. that's what you told me, and
Mhm.
that is a very valid point. And I think he should answer to that. His big thing was that if the Quran is written by Allah and to Muhammad, and you have 30 different Qurans and they all have differences, then that's quite an issue, especially because the Muslims can't explain how there could be significant differences in those different versions of Qurans that came up in the different
Okay. So
years.
what I would say is it's misleading when apologists, and he's not the only one, that talk about 30 Qurans.
Okay.
So there are, let's say, if we're going to use the number 30, I don't know the number, but
Okay.
30 that have been discovered in terms of different editions of the Arabic text of the Quran in different parts of the world. There are differences. Go ahead.
He's not saying they're editions of it. These are actual authentic Qurans that have significant differences in them.
No, my point in when I say edition with like an E in addition is that these are printed editions of the Quranic text. And in those, yeah, there are some differences, but these are generally very minor, and they represent, of course, what do Muslims say about it? They're going to say that this represents different readings, different vocalization in the vowels. Now, are there differences sometimes in consonants? Yes, there are. But does it really change the teachings in the Quran? No. Okay, so similarly, we have textual variants for the Bible too, Old and New Testament. And it doesn't change the doctrine, it doesn't change the stories, it doesn't change the prophecies, it doesn't change anything significant. But are there differences? Yes, there are differences. Now, the point that apologists are making when they're trying to point to differences in Quranic texts, whether we're talking about modern printed editions or we're talking about older manuscripts, like Codex Mashhad, for example, has textual variants if you compare it with the modern day Hafs edition of the Quran, which is usually the standard one that people think of,
Right.
in terms of the Arabic text. So the differences between Codex Mashhad and the Hafs Quran edition, like the typical one that people think of for the modern Arabic or the Arabic edition that people use today, of course there are differences, and there are manuscript differences, variants. But those really are not, as far as I'm aware, very significant, and I'm basing it watching lectures by the preeminent scholar on that text, and he readily acknowledges that there's textual variants. Now, this is the thing: is Muslims, of course, they are popularly taught that there are no textual variants,
Right.
and so.
But
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of their faith, is that the Quran is exactly the same from when God gave, or when Allah gave it to Muhammad, to today. So really, any textual variance, I would think, is a red flag, right? Because that's what they've been told. There cannot be any changes to it.
So they've been told that, but scholars know different. Yes, there are textual variants, but doesn't really affect almost anything that's of any significance. And we can figure out what it was, okay?
Yeah.
So I would say, my concern is not to just help them improve their position within Islam and have a more refined position. My concern is knowing where they would go and could go, and treat it accordingly when I'm talking to somebody, and still refute it. Okay? Rather than trying to bring them along the way, like just go there, meet them there already. And does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you had mentioned a way that you do that, and I thought that was really compelling. So maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, so if our general approach, so we call it the master key. It's a full system that's been developed, and I didn't develop the foundations of it. My friend Alex Karimli, who is basically he's a full-time engineer. He's a regular guy, working guy, but he also has a passion for street evangelism and has done that for many years. and basically found on the street talking to Muslims. He started engaging, I think, after 9/11, and he just, for the next like maybe about 10 years of engaging on the streets, he just found he's hitting his head against the wall. He's not getting anywhere, and you leave the conversation frustrated, and they walk away more confident. And I think a lot of Christians feel that way talking to Muslims.
Right.
So what he eventually developed is a system where we use 5 main points, and of course we build on that if we see the need to, if we have the time to, if we feel there's more is needed. But 5 foundational points that we use to go through step by step to deconstruct the Quran. And go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I know that you had some slides that you want to share, and I just want the audience to know that we're going to be sharing some of these things below in the information and the description below. And also, didn't you say, Greg, and maybe we can speak to this later, but that you do a course on how to speak to Muslims, and that you said you had one coming up? So that might be something else some of our audience might be interested in participating in.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a set time course thing, but we have an online community which is focused that anybody can join, if they're a believer and they want to be trained to reach Muslims and they want to learn our methodology called the Master Key. And it's on an app called School, spelled SKOOL. And our community that's on there, you have to apply to get in, and it doesn't cost anything. And it's called Christ Underground. So I think it's school.com/Christ, and maybe we can include that link to that. Good. And at this point, we have more than 4,000 members in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. So I'm the primary person who's training in that community. We offer free live sessions every week that people can join for training. And I think that's probably what you were thinking of when you mentioned it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I do know so many Christians that have a heart for Muslims, as do I. So I think having some of these tools, Jay is an entity unto himself. I mean, he's been arguing with Muslims for the last 30 years in England. The rest of us lay people, we're just in communities where we meet people, right? And so to have some really effective tools that are really practical and pragmatic, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I like to say, look, someone like Jay and a lot of the other online apologists and stuff that people watch, it's like they know a lot about a lot of different issues, a lot of different topics. And I would say, if you're going to engage that way, where basically now, Jay has developed a strategy, but generally when we're looking at stuff online, when I look at it, when I talk to people who watch stuff, they don't really have a strategy. They don't have a system of where do you start, where do you go next, what are the things that you present and walk through. And I think that's a challenge for Christians who really want to reach their Muslim friends or family members, neighbors. They're like, where do I start? What do I use? And so really you're left with, answer their questions. Well, their questions is going to put you on defensive. Okay, so you're going to have to basically fend off. And with Muslims, it's like on another level.
Oh, I know. It's intense.
Right. And when we are on the defensive, then there's essentially, in general, there's no way to win in that context. Right. You will walk away maybe successfully fending off the objections, but it doesn't persuade them. Okay. They basically just had a whole lot of opportunity to take pot shots. Right. And, whether we're good enough to answer them and survive the conversation is generally Muslims or Christians are not equipped for doing that. And even myself, I know a lot about apologetics, and I could fend it off, but I'm not going to persuade them with those answers. Exactly.
I mean, and there are classic things that Muslims will say. I mean, most Christians, anyone who's engaged Muslims at this point, at least for myself, there are classic things that they are told by their imam. Well, Jesus never claimed to be God. And, Abraham went to Mecca. And they have a lot of standard things that that a lot of Christians don't know how to defend, and they'll say, well, if Jesus said, my God, why have thou forsaken me?" A lot of Christians just don't know how to answer those basic things that Christians will, or that Muslims will use.
Yes. So, like I said, even answering them, even if the person is more educated in their faith, of course, and that's what I want. I'm a pastor. I care about, and I especially care about equipping people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Sure.
of course, I want them to. They should be able to answer those things, but even answering them will not generally persuade Muslims that Islam is false, the Bible's true, and that's
Right.
what I'm really concerned with. Is what has the best shot of persuading a Muslim that the Quran is false and the Bible's true, right? And so that when I frame it that way, if that's my goal, then my goal isn't just to give answers. It isn't to give any argument against Islam. Mm-hmm. It's, there are a lot of things online. Of course, if we watch what Christians are often saying about Islam, especially when they're critiquing it, mm-hmm. you and I will probably say, yeah, like, okay, obviously Islam is false. But how did those arguments go over with Muslims?
Right.
That's my question.
Right. And there are Christian polemic people, polemicists, I guess is how you say it.
Yes.
There's the David Woods, there's the apostate prophet, and there's so many of them that are so good, and they have been tremendously effective. But I'm not a David Wood. I'm not someone who's got the Quran memorized and knows every discrepancy in the Quran and has got every Bible verse. I'm not that accomplished, right? So I have to go to tools that I can use when approaching a Muslim in my community.
So what I'm saying is, as somebody who on the ground talking to them a lot, I don't see that kind of stuff actually being generally effective. It doesn't mean that people haven't come to Christ, of course. So I'm not questioning that, but I'm talking about what has the best shot at reaching the people who are devout and at least semi-knowledgeable, if not very knowledgeable about what they believe as a Muslim, instead of just using kind of typical, common, fairly weak, or arguments that Muslims have answers to.
Right. So, okay. So let's get into it. So you have a system that you think has been very effective. You said you had like 5 talking points or something that you could use. Maybe you can share that with me.
Yeah, these are just some pictures of ministry stuff. So let me get to. This is an overview of the 5 main points we go through. So we call them, of course, Islam has what they call the 5 pillars of Islam. This is not that. We kind of use that as a basis for describing our methodology. So when we teach Christians, like we call it the real 5 pillars of Islam, and here are the 5 main things we are going to deconstruct. Okay, these are major points that they would affirm that are very essential to what Muslims believe. And if we can deconstruct that, then basically we can falsify Islam. And let me just say, before I get into that, there are 2 main stages to what we're doing is first deconstruction and then reconstruction. So while most of the time when we are trying to reach Muslims, we have to, most of our effort goes into deconstruction, because there's like a big, as the Apostle Paul says, a stronghold, right? A belief system that needs to be torn down and dismantled in order for us to then have a clear path to share the gospel. Yeah. So we have what we call 5 real pillars of Islam, and we have 5 biblical pillars that we reconstruct. Okay. All right. So the 5 pillars that these are positive statements that we're going to aim to refute. The first is that the Bible was corrupted. And this is the most foundational issue, because
every one of them says that. Right.
Of course, everything comes back to that, because if you're going to bring up something about the divinity of Christ, the Trinity, the atonement, the cross, anything, and we're trying to reason with them. They say, "Show me where Jesus says, 'I am God, worship me,'" and we're going to show them divinity, passages that support the divinity of Christ. And let's say we're actually successful in getting them to agree that the Gospel of John or the Gospel of Matthew says it. Okay?
Right.
Which is very hard in itself to convince them of that.
Right,
will
because
fight on
he doesn't say I am God. He
Of
says
course.
it, but he says it in the way that the people of that generation understood it, not necessarily in this generation.
Yeah, he does it in all sorts of ways. It's all over the place in the New Testament. Writings,
Yeah.
Gospels, epistles. So, but the issue is, how do you persuade them that that's the case? Because they're going to argue and try to rebut everything that we bring up. And if anybody has had any experience talking to a Muslim, they know that's the case. And it's very frustrating. It's like very obvious, but they're trying to they do everything to deny it.
Sure. All right.
Okay.
What's number 2? I'm having trouble reading because I'm reading on my screen
Okay, but
here.
just to say, our approach is we do not, to explain the first one, we focus only on Old Testament.
Okay.
This is the big difference. We do not
right.
debate with them about theological issues. We do not talk about ethical issues, as I was talking about before. We don't do the moral critique.
Interesting. Okay, good.
Okay. Now,
right.
typically, a Christian is going to try to debate about the theological issues. Okay. And they're going to focus on Jesus and Trinity and atonement.
And clearly that doesn't work. So
and it's not
I'm
working.
anxious. Yeah, it's not working. It's very hard to get them to
if
listen.
we had a lot more time, I could explain why it's not really working. Okay?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that Christians need to learn about this. Okay.
Well, that's why the people watching this need to join your group of 4,000, and learn these techniques that I think are very, very helpful. Good.
So our approach, basically, we look at what we call the 5 real pillars of Islam, which represent essentially 5 foundational statements or beliefs that Muslims have, and we aim to dismantle or deconstruct them one by one. These are not what Muslims would call their pillars, but these are basically representing 5 foundational issues. The first one is that the Bible, or in our case, because we focus on the Old Testament, the Torah was corrupted. Secondly, God authored both the Qur'an and the Torah, so he's behind both.
Okay.
3, Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba.
I know that's a tough one for Christians and Jews to buy, but okay.
Of course. Okay. Number 4, that Ishmael was the father of the Arabs in Mecca, and Muhammad was a descendant of Ishmael and thereby inherited prophethood from Abraham.
Okay.
Okay. Number 5, Muhammad received his revelation patterned after the same way as Moses received his revelation.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe you can unpack one of them. How about number 2? Let's go for number 2. What do you think?
Okay.
Can you unpack a little bit for that?
Yeah, of course.
We won't have time here, but folks, we're going to place this information. We're going to give you an opportunity to go to Pastor Greg's group, and if you know Muslims or you're near a Muslim community and you have a heart for people who really are deceived by a cult, it really truly is a death cult. I just encourage you to go to Pastor Greg. We're not all the Dr. J. Smiths. We're not all David Woods. We're not all Sam Samoons able to speak to all of these things, but we are people in a community who love people who don't know the Lord, and this is a great opportunity to learn things about your Muslim neighbors. So number 2.
Yeah, so just as a sample, right? So the second pillar is saying that the author of the Quran and the author of the Torah is the same author. So at this stage, we compare a story. And so this is typically a short story or short segment of a story we compare. First, we start from, and it's about Joseph. So we look at in the Quran in chapter 12 or Surah 12, verses 16 to 18. This is about the story of Joseph having been thrown in the well, and he's going to be sold into slavery. And at this point in the story, in the Quran, it's when the brothers come back to their father, Jacob, and they present the shirt that has blood on it as if it's, Joseph's shirt, and then his reaction to seeing the shirt. So we're going to look at what the Quran says, and then we're going to look at what Genesis says. Okay. So in verses 16 to 18, it says, "Then they," that's the brothers of Joseph, "returned to their father in the evening weeping. They cried, 'Our father, we went racing and left Joseph with our belongings, and a wolf devoured him.' but you will not believe us no matter how truthful we are. And they brought his shirt stained with false blood. He responded, no, your souls must have tempted you to do something evil, so I can only endure with beautiful patience. It is Allah's help that I seek to bear your claims. Now, what we see in this passage, before we go to what the Torah says in Genesis, is essentially, let's make sure we understand it. The brothers come back to Jacob. They're having fake tears. They say to him, Joseph was killed. How he died was, and wolf ate him, and it was because we didn't watch over him. We were negligent of him, and while we were, the wolf came in and ate him. And they say, we know you won't believe us, but this is Joseph's shirt. And then Jacob in the Qur'an doesn't believe them. He then, of course, thinks that if he's not dead, as he said, he's alive.
Okay.
So in Genesis chapter 37, verses 31 to 35, it says, they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. They sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, this we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not. And he identified it and said, it is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. It says, no, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning. Thus his father wept for him.
Yeah. Wow.
So what difference do you see there, Kathy?
Everything. It's not the same story.
Essentially, what we're trying to highlight is that when we compare the narratives side by side, what is a Muslim ultimately going to say? They're going to say the Torah is corrupted. People often they're not focusing on the narratives because they think that we need to talk about doctrine. Our point is, stop talking about doctrine. I like to say we focus on details, not doctrine.
Okay.
Details. Yeah,
right.
exactly. Okay. Because it's almost like the less significant it is, the more important it is for us to talk about it.
Right.
Because there then isn't any even hypothetical motive why the Jews would have changed it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the thing. So Greg, I think this is really great stuff. And it seems that you have found a way to speak to people that makes sense to them. Sometimes in our Western minds, the way we logically accept or reject things is not the same as others. And especially if, you've got connectors in your brains that grew up Muslim, there is an understanding that you're going to have that a Western mind is not going to have. And it seems like Greg may have cracked the code. And if you've cracked the code, I think other people can crack the code too, with some direction. But what I do love is that you have materials that are good, that we can share. And again, folks, if you go below, you can do it. We're going to put information on how you can reach Greg's information, reach his group. If you have a heart for Muslims and for people caught in that cult, I am hoping that you will go to Greg's information. And wow, I don't know what the best approach is. And my guess is the best approach is whatever your particular skill set is. So if you're a Sam Shamoon or you're a David Wood or you're a Dr. J. Smith, you are a gifted and talented person that can talk to Muslims in a way that you can be very strong, and you've got everything memorized, but not everybody can do that. And it sounds to me like Greg has figured out a way to take the truths of our scripture and really simplify our approach. And really, instead of being so big and polemic, maybe we just go into simplicity of let's just compare two scriptures that are written by God, and let's try to understand how they could be so different for no reason at all. And I think that is really, really brilliant on your part. And I am guessing that they're just going to flock to your church. I just hope that that's the case. And I haven't been to Canada for a lot of years now. So now I have a new friend in Canada. So I'll have to head up there once y'all are stop being mad at Americans. So, which is
Well,
probably
I'm not mad,
never.
although unfortunately so many Canadians are, but I'm not.
You know what?
Would
Well,
love to
I'm
have.
glad you're not mad because you shouldn't be. We're neighbors and we're friends, and we are not going to talk politics today, but we are going to talk about Greg's work, and his work is at the Saturate Church. And I hope, folks, that you will go to his information and learn these basic techniques on how to talk to our Muslim neighbors. So, people, this is Greg Armstrong from Saturate Church. I just want to thank him for coming and for his love and his heart for the Lord and his heart for our Muslim neighbor, his Muslim neighbors, our Muslim neighbors as well. And folks, what you've heard today is the truth, and you can handle the truth.